In this edition of 2020 Daily Trail Markers, the Iowa caucuses are just days away, and candidates are expected to spend the weekend crisscrossing the state as they rally for last-minute support. Ed O'Keefe has the latest.
Monday's caucus looming, Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg today crammed in 7 events between them.
Every 4 years, everything begins here in Iowa.
Go in on Monday evening and caucus for us.
The 4 senators running for president are stuck in Washington, including the frontrunner Bernie Sanders, giving Biden and Buttigieg an in-person edge.
Who among us is most likely to be able to defeat Donald Trump?
The senators are left to campaign mostly from a distance.
I'm here. I'm hoping that the people see it as a plus.
And pay for ad time to make their final pitch.
But I'm switching parties to caucus for Elizabeth Warren in 2020.
Together, we will transform this country.
The ads are about unity, but there's also some infighting.
I've seen Vice President Biden making the case that we cannot afford to take a risk on somebody new right now. I believe at a time like this, the risk we cannot afford to take is to turn to the same Washington mindset that has brought us to this point.
The man not contending in Iowa, former New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg, is making his case on the air. Campaign spending reports show Bloomberg has already spent more than $140 million on TV and internet advertising nationwide. Bernie Sanders is still back in Washington for the impeachment trial, but his campaign is throwing a concert tonight with some of his surrogates and the singer Bon Iver in his absence. Sanders and the other senators running for president are going to get out on the campaign trail as soon as they can this weekend, and then likely have to head back to Washington. Tanya?
Ed, thanks for that. And for more on all this, let's bring in CBS News 2020 campaign reporters Adam Brewster and Musadiq Bidar. They're both in Des Moines, Iowa, and are both covering the closing arguments Democratic presidential hopefuls are making in the final days before the Iowa caucuses. Welcome to both of you. Musadiq, our latest CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows Senator Bernie Sanders leading in the state. He's still in Washington for the Senate impeachment trial, however. How is his campaign addressing that?
Well, the campaign is relying on its infrastructure. They have more than 250 staffers across the state, and top-level surrogates have been flying into Iowa all week long. Today, Representatives Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib were out campaigning for him. His wife, Dr. Jane Sanders, has also been stumping for Senator Sanders. And as you heard Ed mention, their musician Bon Iver has a concert tonight, Vampire Weekend tomorrow. So they're really working and relying on this infrastructure to help carry that message while Senator Sanders is out of the state. One thing the campaign does feel good about is that if there is high turnout on Monday night, they feel they will do really well. They think that they can do well with young voters and Latino voters, which is a growing demographic here in Iowa. And meanwhile, Senator Sanders is driving home this message that he is the one who can fight for working class Americans. He says that his political revolution can begin here in Iowa, where he narrowly lost to Secretary Hillary Clinton in 2016. And he's also telling voters that the Democratic establishment is scared of him. He says that he is their worst nightmare. And if Senator Sanders is successful here on Monday night, it will largely be in part because of his strong ground game and strong infrastructure and the field work that they have been putting in while he has been absent the last few days.
And Adam, former Vice President Joe Biden narrowly trailed Sanders in our poll. And as you mentioned in your piece, he's effectively been able to camp out in the state. What is his closing argument to voters there in Iowa?
He's continuing to make the pitch that he has been making, that he is the candidate who is best suited to take on President Trump. And part of that is he believes he is best suited also to restore the values that he believes have been lost under the Trump administration. He said yesterday during a speech in Waukee, Iowa, a suburb of Des Moines, that character is on the ballot this time. This is something we've seen the former vice president talk about. That speech yesterday just took on President Trump head on and didn't mention his Democratic rivals. He said later in the day that is who candidates need to be focused on rather than getting into a circular firing squad and attacking each other. He's been camped out in Iowa in the week leading up to the caucuses. He really ramped up his visits and time in the state starting around Thanksgiving, just after Thanksgiving, spending a lot of time in Iowa, and that allowed him to get out into some rural areas, into some smaller and mid-sized towns, and senior campaign officials believe those are places that they can do well on Monday night after spending so much time there.
Another candidate who has been in Iowa as the Senate trial has progressed and has seemed to benefit from that lack of competition is former Mayor Pete Buttigieg. He singled out Sanders and Biden while speaking to voters in Decorah Thursday night. I want to play some of what he had to say.
I hear Vice President Biden saying that this is no time to take a risk on someone new. But history has shown us that the biggest risk we could take with a very important election coming up is to look to the same Washington playbook and recycle the same arguments and expect that to work against a president like Donald Trump, who is new in kind. And then I hear Senator Sanders calling for a kind of politics that says you've got to go all the way here and nothing else counts. So this is no time to get caught up in reliving arguments from before. The less 2020 resembles 2016 in our party, the better.
So, Musadiq, how are voters reacting to this sort of apparent shift in Buttigieg's speeches? I mean, he's never really gone after his Democratic competitors so directly before.
Well, he's focused his message all along on saying that the same Washington playbook won't work against President Trump. And to hear him draw these clear distinctions against his Democratic rivals could help voters make that final decision in the last few days. Buttigieg has focused his message a lot on unity, bringing moderates and independents and what he calls future former Republicans together. President Trump did win 31 counties in Iowa that previously voted for President Barack Obama, and Buttigieg is focused in those areas. He has ramped up his visits a lot in January. As you mentioned, as you heard Adam mention there with Vice President Biden going to these small areas, Buttigieg has been doing the same, going to those rural towns, trying to get some of those moderate voters to come over to his camp, and it could be something that'll pay off for him on caucus night, because if he's successful, it'll be because of this message that he wants to bring everyone together and kind of focus on those moderate policies that voters may want a new voice to carry.
And Adam, Senators Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar have both been stuck in Washington for the impeachment trial. How are they pitching themselves in the final days before the caucuses? I've noticed that they do search out the cameras when they can in the halls there, in the Senate halls.
That's part of the way that they are able to get FaceTime, is doing interviews even with local media back here in Iowa, whether it's remote television interviews or interviews with local newspapers. They have tried to keep their name in the press out here. But one of the things that Senator Warren talked about on the trail last weekend when she was here in Iowa is that she believes a woman is best suited to take on President Trump. And she says that women have had success in the era of President Trump. She also brought back a message that she was making earlier in the cycle, that she's a fighter, that she is someone who will work on behalf of people and try to champion progressive causes and other issues that people believe in. Her team, their theory of the case has been organize. And she built out an operation here early in Iowa, earlier than many campaigns even were here. We'll see how that investment pays off on Monday night. As for Senator Klobuchar, she has also been talking about her ability to win. She always says she's won every race, every place, every time. She's also been framing the election not just as what she sees as an economic check on President Trump, but what she's calling a decency check. And she said that she brings a message that has helped that Democrats have been able to run and win on in 2018 in competitive House districts and competitors' governor's races. She points to people who have won who have a similar message to her. She has been all over this state. She has been to all 99 counties. She's held now more events than anyone else who's currently left in the race here in Iowa, and her team feels good that there are going to be people who the only candidate who visited their hometown might be Senator Klobuchar, and that could give them an edge, they feel, in some of those precincts.
So, Musadiq, two lower polling candidates, Andrew Yang and Tom Steyer, have been crisscrossing the state. What has been their message to voters? Are they gaining any ground?
Well, one thing Andrew Yang has been talking about is that there is a new economy coming to America, and that needs a new perspective in Washington. He says that he doesn't want to leave a lot of Americans behind who may be displaced by jobs due to what will happen in the technological revolution, he calls it. He has essentially moved to Iowa and has been spending a lot of time here. He is closing up a 17-day bus tour across the state. His family is also here with him. And he is hoping that that bet will pay off for him on caucus night. Meanwhile, businessman Tom Steyer is pitching himself as the unconventional politician who can take on President Trump. He likes to remind voters that he didn't inherit his money from his parents and that he built his businesses from scratch himself. And he says he can take on President Trump when it comes to the economy. He also reminds voters that he has a successful track record of building grassroots movements, especially in Iowa, where his organizations were active in 2018. And that's something that he's hoping will pay off for him on Monday night.
All right, Adam Brewster and Musadiq Bidar, thank you so much.